Hello and welcome to Skeleton Songs, Mac Woo edition.
Mac Woo?
Mac Woo, make a CRPG with us.
Oh, yeah.
If we included all the CRPG acronym.
Mac Woo.
No.
That sounds
Mac
Pictish.
Woo.
This is the quote. I just love this quote so much. I said Pictish, it reminded me because the Picts lived in what is now Scotland, and Igododin was a poem written in like the 7th century. No, earlier I think, but it's sort of reconstituted in the 7th century, about this bloke who rode out from a king to the north and fought the Deerans, basically the York people, at a bridge, and everyone died, and then it was sad. So the poem spends lots of time enumerating all the virtues of the warriors. And the reason I know about it is because I'm an Arthur nut, and Igododin is one of the first places to mention Arthur as a historical character, although only obliquely. But I was listening to the audiobook, which is the English translation of Igododin. I will get to the point shortly. It's by this great poet, Gillian Clarke.
It's okay, babe, we're 1 minute in. If you can keep going like this, I'll just go to sleep.
But she was talking about the process of translating it. She says something really, really... I mean, she says... in order to find the music in another language, you have to abandon the music of the first, because the Welsh in English version is obviously really, especially it's old Welsh as well. It's not even like modern Welsh. It's totally inaccessible to a modern audience, including me. But I love that. In order to find one music, you have to abandon the music of the original language.
Well, it's like each language is playing its own tune. And
yeah.
If you want to really... you're an Arthurian nut, I'm a Old English nut, and there's lots of translations of Beowulf, probably the best example of an Old English poem that we have. And I think far and away the consensus is the best one is Seamus Heaney, who is a poet, and he chose to translate the original Old English very loosely, which meant that he really captured this sort of lyrical magic that you just can't get. There's a couple of really good sort of linguistic first translations too, which are also very interesting from the linguistic point of view, of course, but they just don't get across the same effect that Beowulf would have had probably on the audience at the time, as Seamus Heaney does, who does a fabulous job. And
this is the thing. I think the tune is a good point, because I'd sort of imagined before we got into translating our games that, you know, you keep the tune, you just change the orchestration for different instruments, but it's really not like that. I remember when we had when we were looking at translations for Book of Hours, there's a reference to 77 wings in English. Somebody goes for 77 wings, which is there's an English expression, 40 winks, which means having a short nap, and 77 wings is a suggestion you've nipped into the Manchester dream. And when we tried out some Russian translators, they changed it to reference to it being Death's little brother, which I remember when we got a friend, a colleague, an employee, a Russian is the word I was looking for, to peer review it, basically. He came back and said it sounds like old church Slavonic and it's very elegant, but that phrase lands oddly. And I was sceptical about it, but there just wasn't any way to keep the original thing unless you put a sort of note in saying this is a thing, something you just have to throw away what's originally there, in order to find something else that is as good.
And
so as I get really fussy about translation, my monocle pops out of my eye and lands in my soup. But eventually I started to learn to let go. Go on.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, that you, when we first did localization as a company on Cultist Simulator, I remember you really struggled with it because you really didn't want to take your hand off the wheel, because, you know, writing is your whole thing. And I know that you put a hell of a lot of time and effort into making every word a specific thing, especially because your kind of writing is this pithy, specific, short form content thing, which means that you can actually choose every word to land in a particular way or imply a certain thing. If you were writing a more kind of long form text game, I think you probably would be less particular because you just couldn't keep that up. It's like the difference between prose and poetry, right? And so I remember seeing you go through a period of murdering your darlings and being quite cross and upset about it until you realised that basically if you are going to translate your game, you have to trust the translators and come to terms with the fact that the translated version is not the Alexis Kennedy version, but it, like a good, you know, translation of the Welsh poem that I'm not going to try and pronounce, it's its own new thing. that is more, it has the soul of the original, whereas if you translated it exactly, probably it would land pretty oddly to whoever was reading it in the new language.
I know Gillian Clarke says that she's not a Welsh scholar, and I think she didn't grow up speaking Welsh, it's not her mother tongue, but obviously she grew up in Wales, she speaks Welsh. She's her parents both spoke Welsh natively. She's been like appointed as National Poet of Wales or something. And it's not a binary distinction between you speak this language like a native and indeed an expert, and you don't speak it at all, which is why often we get feedback on translations. We have to treat it quite carefully because the original translators might have opinions. I remember the French translation of Cultist Simulator used the word Sphinx for moth because Sphinx moths are a thing, more of a thing in the French language, and because it's got particular connotations in French as in English. I really like it, having had it explained to me, but I was worried and I went back to translations and talked about it. But we're way off topic, which is totally my fault. And
I was just going to use the corollary as a reason for you not to judge me for saying Z and Z.
We'll say that, but I was going to say that you talk about murdering your darlings was a great segue. What's the Z and Z?
Well, you were mean to me today because you
was I mean or would I help?
I grew up in America,
God
and
bless.
I am therefore just totally confused about certain pronunciations. So, for example, for whatever reason, I don't know what synapse was firing that day, but I just, whenever I see like what a British person would call like a lunch hall or something, I just am like...
We would call what?
Is a lunch hall? I don't know what the word is.
I think in Anglo-Saxon literature, possibly, it's where the kings lift their mead gifts.
Where did children eat
to the ring
food
givers
at school?
A cafeteria.
But I thought that was American.
Canteen.
You see,
yeah, you're right. Dining room.
Cafeteria is dining hall, right?
Yeah.
Because cafeteria is the word that just comes to mind, but I know that's American. And I just have no idea whether Z or Z is American or British. So every so often I will say the American variant, and Alexis will jump upon me like a starved cheetah on a gazelle.
Where do you buy food?
From Waitrose.
Do you buy it from a shop or a store?
A shop, obviously.
Yes. What do you use to heat soup when it's not a microwave?
Oh, you see, I know where you're going with this one.
Yeah, you do.
I heat it on a pan, on a stove top.
On a stove top, not a stove.
Oh, yes, that's another American. I just always refer to the oven bit as the stove, and AK's always like, you're being American. Anyway, that's probably not...
But you're going to segue to my ghastly solecism.
I'm always desperate to get into your ghastly solecism, my love.
I found out today when I was doing some research for destinations and travelling at night.
Oh, yes. Ding, shame.
Screwed up with Cultist Simulator. Cultist Simulator set in 1924-ish to 6-ish, and by the time we get to the XL DLC, it's crystallised into being basically 1926-ish. Certainly the 1920s. And I was quite careful about lots of the city names, because city names and country boundaries changed enormously.
There was a lot of movement
over the first half of the 20s, as I know, because you couldn't find a single good reference for where the national borders.
No, the map in Exile that I had to draw was a sort of concretism of a bunch of different maps at the time, because literally, month to month, the land boundaries and often the names of countries would change, and we really didn't want to get that wrong.
We did. Well, this is the thing. So travelling at night much easier, because the boundaries in Europe now are, by and large, the ones that were set in 1945.
Yeah, I was really grateful.
Right, stop it, guys. We've all had a drink. It's gone a bit crazy. Yeah. But now, look, that's where the boundaries are. It's time for bed. But there's a place called, and I apologise to the one Romanian who might be listening, Cloinapoca, in Romania.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Cloinapoca, I believe.
I like that.
And because Romanian's bloody Romance language disguised as Slavic language, so I've been
rather lamely calling it Cluj-Napoca.
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
isn't how
in
it's
1926, I put it on the map, Cloinapoca, I thought. And lovely... No, it's Cluj, you're right, it's not Cloy. This is what I mean about it being...
chaos.
Yeah, total chaos. Anyway, I put it on the map, I thought that's a nice, interesting city. Looked up a bit, birthplace of Matthew Corvinus and all this interesting stuff. And I put an angel in a box in there. And
we did get that nice email from one person who actually lived in Cloinapoca.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and he was like, this is the first time I've ever seen my place ever mentioned.
So I went away feeling pleased with myself, and I found out today that it wasn't called Cluj-Napoca or anything else in 1926 or 1948. 1926 it was called Klausenburg as much as anything else, but it didn't get the Napoca bit added, which is the original name of the Roman city that stood where Cluj now stands, until 1977, when Ceausescu, the dictator at the time, was sort of tagging on historical things to the back end of city names to make everywhere sound fancier. So it's just called plain old Cluj. So that's my ghastly solecism. Anyway, this is the content people keyed in for. This is sort of
high-octane etymological experience that people pay money to play our games and experience.
Murdering our darlings.
Yeah, that's a big part of game dev. At the start of game dev, everything is possible. Everything can be done. Everything's exciting. I'll ask any game dev, and the probability is that they will say that the start of a game is their favourite bit. And as we progress through linear time on a project, we basically hate it more and more. And there's a sort of famous graph, which is basically an inverse bell curve of enjoyment, which is, everything's wonderful. This is the best job in the world. And then for about 6 months up to 5 years, when you're actually in the dregs of work, you hate it because all you see are the flaws. You have to realise that,
You've been looking at it for 2 years.
You're bored of it. You haven't actually got all the resources you need to have the vision, or one person working at the company isn't producing the work to the standard that you want, or the money's fallen through in a certain bit, so you're going to have to get rid of that bit and do something else. So you hate it and it's miserable and it's awful. And then just before launch, it all starts coming together and you start feeling proud again. Launch is totally soul-crushingly awful, even if it goes well. And then you're onto the new project. So that is the game dev cycle. But we are currently in basically the start of the downward curve. So we are at the stage where we know enough about the game to know kind of what it is now. We've answered most of the big difficult questions, and what we are now doing is refining what it is, which means that we are making difficult choices like the ones you were doing this sprint.
Let me just interject there, because you're right about difficult choices, and let's talk about that in a minute, but I'm still really enjoying it. I came back after the Christmas break and was excited to get to work on it.
It's really fun, isn't it, at the minute?
It's really fun. We've learned so much, which is a lot of the point of it.
Yeah.
Is we like making things with our own two hands. Apart from, the guy who's doing the music and the other guy who's doing the art, half the art, and the other guy who's came up with a bit of the coding and the rest of it. But the point is,
Adrian may be a professional artist, but can he badly animate some moths around a lamppost?
Or a flag.
Or a flag. Listeners, I have been focused on flags. Maths is not my forte. I do pictures. But we figured it out.
We did.
So hooray.
Murdering your darlings.
Yeah. You were the one murdering them.
I was. Well, this is what you were saying was at the start of the down curve, and I said, well, emotionally, not exactly, but also when I put together.
I just wanted to puncture the image that I think some people have who are not game devs, that game dev is this sort of magical creative term. But at the same time, game devs never met a complaint they didn't like. There's a lot of kvetching about game dev, and fundamentally we have the best job in the world because, certainly you and me are our own bosses as well. So it's just really fun and creative. So that's all great.
That's the thing. There's a reason people stay in game dev. And it's not the pay, guys.
It's not the pay. But it's the creativity and it's fun. And at the minute we're really enjoying it. My point was just that we are entering the long doing all the work bit.
It's like rabbits. It's like if you grow rabbits in your garden.
What, tasty in soup?
I say grow rabbits. Well, yes.
You have only the vaguest. You can tell who cooks in this relationship.
If you engender rabbits in your garden,
yeah,
then they're these lop-eared adorable things, but their destiny is the soup pan.
That so is. I've got vendetta against rabbits.
And what was it used to call the rabbit who ate your slippers?
Hot pot.
So the destiny is the pot, so every day you have to raise these rabbits, knowing that at some point you're going to have to start cutting bits off them.
No, this is horrible.
Well, murder your darlings.
Okay, that's okay. Just to be clear, anyone who's listening with a pet rabbit, there's also the Elysium fields of rabbitdom, which is they just live in a field, probably in Switzerland, and they have a great time. So ignore everything
in America,
Alexis has just
farm
said.
upstate.
In America, I'd say, shut up, y'all. I'm in middle school and I used to be in kindergarten.
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten. That's what I'd say. I wonder how I never fit in.
So the point of all this is we put I put together a list of places you could visit, things you could do, and then you spec some of them out, and eventually you start whittling them down to the ones you can actually do. And the thing about all games, I think CRPGs are more like this than anything else, is on the one hand it holds out this glittering prize, this glistening delight of, well, you just do a short conversation in each case, and once you're in the conversation you're like, ooh, but I could do some reactive branches based on what you said over there. And, oh Christ, I'm a week over deadline. I'm 2 weeks over deadline. Shut it down. And then you get to what you've called the Curst curse.
I have called the Curst curse. I read a blog post today. Probably the people listening to this are quite likely to have seen our blog, so I won't reconstitute it entirely, but we talked about...
It's a good one, you're funny.
Thanks, Boo. We talked about something we had learned from Planescape Torment, which is our Lord and Saviour of the CRPG genre, along with Disco Elysium. That seems to be the consensus. And there is a city you go to at the end of the game, towards the end of the game, called Curst. And it just compares slightly less favourably than probably was intended with the initial city that you were in, called... I've literally forgotten it because I'm tired. Sigil, thank you. Because Sigil is massive and they obviously spent lots of time on it, and then Curst, I would guess as a producer that they had run out of time and or money by that point, so they were kind of hustling to get it done, and you can just tell. So one of the things that we are trying to do with Travelling at Night, which by the way, it's 15 minutes in and this is the first time we're mentioning the game, so I hope that somebody is
Travelling
new
at Night,
and listening
a
to this.
combat-free CRPG from Weather Factory. Brackets, so like and subscribe, close brackets.
Oh God, you see, you're lucky this is a podcast, so he's not going to do like the YouTuber face. I'm still haunted. We met a friend of ours who is a YouTuber. A shout out to System Chalk, who jokingly did the YouTuber face, and it still occasionally haunts me in dreams. It was very upsetting. But anyway, yes. So the Cursed curse essentially means that often with CRPGs, which are really big, heavy games that can just sort of fit infinite amounts of content. Like there's never too much content in a CRPG.
What was it Espinarseth called them?
He called them MSGs,
yeah,
which stand for massively single-player games, which I think was a brilliant coinage.
Espinarseth is a Norwegian academic who writes about games.
Yeah, they're basically, they just are an endless maw, and you can put everything into them. But a lot of the problems that developers find when they're developing CRPGs is because of this combination of, firstly, the CRPG can just eat anything you throw at it, and secondly, that devs are constantly coming up with new ideas and have this like big grand vision of like the best game they're ever going to make, is the start of a CRPG tends to be slightly more fleshed out than the end of a CRPG, because at the start, you've got all the money in the world, you haven't spent any of it yet, but by the end of it, when you're 5 years late to deadline and your publisher's cross with you, and you know actually somebody needed some sort of surgery that you weren't expecting, suddenly all that money has dried up and you just got to finish the damn thing. So I think that's probably what happened, and what we are trying to do with Travelling at Night is trying to plan ahead so that we space out the content throughout the game so that we don't end up with this kind of top or bottom heavy effect of all the content in one place.
And it's such a familiar pattern.
I'm sure we'll make a mistake.
I mean, well, we already have. But what I mean is you pick Planescape Torment as an example because the Cursed curse is so euphonious.
And also, to be clear, because we love Planescape Torment, and when I pick that out as an example of, I think, something that went wrong, it's only because the rest of the game is so excellent, and I am very interested to learn the lessons we can from this brilliantly made game. This is not at all insulting to. But
everybody who's played a CRPG is nodding at this point.
Yeah,
and they
know what we mean.
One of my favourite CRPGs of recent years is Owlcat's Rogue Trader game, and again, same thing, absolutely stuffed with material all the way through, and then just towards the end, it dries up a bit, and some of the they've done a bunch of updates. Maybe it's improved now, but because I come not to bury Owlcat, but to praise them. But you can tell. Obviously, by the time we get to the end, they get this fucking thing out the door.
Did we mention that devs are sick of their own games?
They break into the workshop and find our skeletons with a hand still curled around the coffee cups.
I can't believe that when I first started in game dev, I actually enjoyed launches. It was because I wasn't on the creative side.
Yeah.
And now I'm so embarrassed.
But the point is, you have to work out when to cut back. And if you cut back too soon or in the wrong place, then... you killed the game, and it doesn't feel generous. Which, for those who read my book, you will know that generosity and whatever the hell the other two were, are two of the characteristics of good games. And if you cut back too late, then you end up either running out of time and having to cut back anyway somewhere else, or you lose your mind and are taken away by the police, or often both. And so we looked at our list of cities a couple of weeks ago, and we always talk about the grieving period.
Yeah.
That you decide what you're going to need to cut, and you can't quite accept, and you think, but what if we, and how if we could? and then you realise you do, and then once you made the decision and it's 2 weeks on, you're like, why the hell did I ever want to put that in the game? There's a whole... Those of you who played Sun and Sea probably sort of clocked that the game is divided into sort of rectangles, roughly the size of a piece of A4, because that's what we use when planning it out. And there's a whole sort of column of pieces of A4 at the right-hand end that appears in the promotional map we did for the game that doesn't appear in the game, because there's no way we could finish writing it in the time. And I spent weeks being like, but what if we don't put the deconstruction in, because it'll... And none of it... And like 2 weeks after you decided, I was like, what's up, deconstruction? Who cares? So... Keon, the microstate in Switzerland, under the hand of Kione,
dead.
Is well. What is? did the gentleman not say that is not dead, which may eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. I like to think that he sounded like that. He did a sort of sad face. So some of this stuff will go into probably all of this stuff will go into DLC. And
okay, well, that's ding 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 red flag marketing. Okay, I was literally AK has just shot us in the foot.
There is a good chance that some of this stuff may ultimately emerge in some form in DLC.
Okay, that you've made it slightly better, but you've still totally nobbled us, because I was about to say earlier that I think this is part of the reason that certain players, I think probably mostly PC players, but certain players are often
the good ones.
No, not the good ones. Stop interrupting.
I don't think I can. I'll try.
I was going to say that I think this is part of the reason why some PC players get a bit salty about DLC, because often when I see a game has released a bit of DLC, it is common to see some people saying this is lazy, I don't like it, this just should have been part of the base game when you launched. And I do understand that perspective, and obviously some DLCs do seem a little bit exploitative. Mostly I don't think they do. But this is part of the reality of game dev, that probably the reason that somebody put out a bit of DLC that you feel should have been in the base game is possibly because either they didn't have the money, or they were going to go to the madhouse if they kept developing it, or the game did better than they expected, so now there's an opportunity to add on that bit that they cut a while ago, but you know, now it's financially justified, so they can put it back in. So I just want to make it clear that when we talk about things that we are taking out of the game, it is not that we then intend to like basically spike you for it after DLC. And we're probably going to do, to be honest, a Perpetual Edition, although we haven't really talked about that. Yeah. For people who have no idea what that means, it basically means that if you buy it at launch, then you get a free everything DLC forever free thing, which I happen to really like and feels generous, and I think other people like too. But yes, I just didn't want anybody listening to this to think, haha, proof that devs deliberately cut off bits of the game.
No, I was thinking about it on parallel lines, because what's going to happen is we'll put the game out and it will sell whatever it sells, and then a year down the line we'll release DLC and we'll put key on. So there's the cities where we're talking about. Well,
depending that it does
cutting
well
brackets, not exactly cutting. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Yes, that's interesting.
Is
transmogrifying.
Keon, Sarajevo. We've combined Vienna and Schloss-Nagelberg. I think that's it actually.
We've removed Pyrrhus.
Yes, Pyrrhus as well is now gone appropriately, and we'll do this. Put out DLC, and someone will post on the Steam forums. Lamau, Weather Factory gouging this game is totally unplayable. It's got Sarajevo in. Do they even know where Bosnia is? I bet they hate Bosnians, and they deliberately withheld it in order to chisel an extra $12 out of other beta purposes. And I will write a long reply which will begin. My fingers are worn to bleeding nubs. I'm typing this with my tongue. My keyboard is sticky with game dev drool. Do you not understand? The whole reason we took it out is because by the time I got as far as Krakow, we were literally medicated in order to be able to finish the game. But I have these 3 pages of notes on the unusual metaphysical consequences of the Yugoslavia being between the ministries and the incorporates that I really wanted to do, and we didn't want to lose it, and we're going to do that with DLC or other something made up. So what you're seeing is a ghost rising from the grave that it was buried in by weeping parents, rather than bean counters choosing money from your hide.
And then what I'll do is I'll delete that,
yes.
And I'll write, thanks so much for your feedback, really helpful smiley face.
Heart. Rainbow sparkle.
Whoa, I've pulled way back on the heart sparkles. Apparently that's not very professional or mature, so whatever. But
yeah, we've tightened up the actual cities to about 80% of.
And the key thing, the reason we want to do this, going back to the Curst, is because we didn't ever want a part of the game to feel like it hadn't got as much love as another part of the game, because we can't change the fact that, you know, time marches on in a linear fashion. We can't change the fact that we only have a certain sum of money to put into this game, but we can be a bit thoughtful about it. And when we talk about getting rid of some of these cities, you're absolutely right that we're not actually getting rid of them. What we have decided to do is to give a variety of experiences in these places. So, for example, some of the really key cities where a lot of the plot centres, we are still keeping absolutely as, you know, visually realised, isometrically traversable, big locations that you can poodle about in for the sake of argument. But a couple of other cities that we've decided to remove with air
When you say
quotes,
a couple, I think you actually mean about. Well, some of them are off map, but all the minor cities that were just going to be spots you pass through on your way to the major cities are now.
we've added a lot.
In fact, I think we added more than we lost,
Hooray!
which rather undermines the whole point of what we were doing.
Win.
Their dialogues, like in Sun to Sea, you stop there, you get a nice bit of key art, and then you get some conversation trees. And again, this is not going to be Sun to Sea sized ports, because otherwise there'd be way too much. But I want to have something.
Because what's important to us in travelling at night is that you really do get a sense that you're travelling across our weird 1940s Europe. And we thought if we didn't include interactable spots across the map, then it would just feel a bit sort of fake and empty. And of course we can put all the love and attention into the core hub cities and we can make those beautiful. But if basically you're clicking across, I don't know, 6 UI elements across the whole of Europe, I think most people would come away feeling a bit like they hadn't really been fulfilled by the experience of travelling across Europe. But equally, we can't spend 20 years making this game and populate all the major cities of Europe with beautiful art, beautiful animations, all the writing that AK would need to do and all the quests that would need to sort of, you know, lattice themselves amongst them. So I think the nicest spot between both of those realities is what we're doing now, which is that we have we have a bunch of fully realised scene cities that have all the bells and whistles that you'd expect from an isometric CRPG, and then on top of that we have a number of cities which have some story elements in them but are presented as a text interface with attractive art rather than a fully explorable scene, and I think there might even be a third variant that we're not exactly sure about yet. But basically this is are murdering our darlings. They're not actually dead. They've just, you know, been turned into waxwork models and we painted a face on them.
Like the what was that mythos story? It wasn't Lovecraft, it was one of his successors, The Horror at the Wax Museum.
Oh yes.
Some murderer entombs everyone in wax and then displays them.
No, I think well, it was probably multiple ones, but the one I heard was that somebody was staying overnight in a waxwork museum, looking after it, and then there's a very realistic waxwork of a famous serial killer, and over the course of the night and the isolation, he gets more and more certain that the waxwork of the well-known serial killer is actually the real guy who has escaped recently from the late, you know, Broadmoor, whatever it is nearby. And I think ultimately, spoiler, it does turn out that it is indeed the serial killer pretending to be a waxwork, and he doesn't do what a serial killer does, and he murders him.
It's
a banger.
It wasn't the one I was thinking of. It sounds better than the one I was thinking of, where the guy at some point dresses up as a dimensional shambler and goes ooh in a sort of Scooby-Doo way.
Well, I think mine was also better because it might be a episode of The Price of Fear, which is one of the best things that Britain has ever done. It was
Vincent Fear.
Vincent Price, the man of the most beautiful voice ever, who I think, as far as I'm aware, was a total charming man as well, like really lovely. But he did, he's the laugh on Thriller, if you don't know who he is, and he did a series because he's super into all these like basically hokey gothic tales of the grim and the macabre, and he had this whole show where he just read spooky short stories, and I think one of them was this waxwork thing. So it was great.
A list of music track tasks and details that our composer is gradually working his way through.
Who we can talk about now.
Well, we can, and I'm 100% confident that he doesn't listen to this podcast, so we can say whatever we like about him.
Yeah, but we
quite like him.
What we want to say about him is that he's really good and we like him. So.
But one of the tracks coming up is Dinner in the Dark, where I think I
you get Vincent Price, do you?
Basically, I was channeling Vincent Price when I wrote the.
Is it going to be played out entirely on the theremin?
Now do the kazoo. Anyway, met all the darlings, but you can drink their blood, so it's great. Silenced my wife.
Sorry, I was just remembering that I just impersonated a kazoo and we're actually going to publish this. And basically, I'm not good enough at editing to work out how to cut that out believably, so that has to stay in. So that was just a moment
about serious stuff. I think we should probably tell people about the pre-alpha.
Okay, yeah. So one of the big things that we totally haven't talked about, because we talked about kazoos and drinking blood, and the Welsh thing that I'm not going to say, is over the Christmas holiday we put out a pre-alpha for a bunch of people who very kindly offered to help us test, and the feedback I think was broadly what we hoped it would be.
Yes.
Which is that, you know, you can tell it's early stages, so there's some pretty clear sort of like this doesn't work, and the one that haunts me is the visual member of this duo is somebody saying that Spencer's run animation looks like a limp noodle. Because he's got these sort of elastic looking legs, and we're fixing that.
It looks a bit like when I used to try to run the 100 metres when I was 12.
Yeah, right at the end when your legs are all real tired. Yeah, and that's fair feedback. This person is right. He's not the only person to say it, and we are addressing the issue. But yeah, broadly speaking, people seem to like it, which is good, because you've got the heebie-jeebs, because this is another game dev thing that basically when you stare at something so long, you kind of go one of two ways. Either you just go egotistical and you just think, you know what, this is going to knock the pants off everybody in the world and it's going to be seismic and everyone's going to think this is the best thing ever. But I think that's probably not the right course to take. Our certain choice of approach is to get incredibly anxious about everything and think it's rubbish. So we do occasionally need to put stuff out and have actual feedback from people who are real and we have no affiliation with, who will tell us if it's rubbish. And in this case, nobody told us it was rubbish. So that was good. And I think we're definitely on the right track.
I think we are. I think we talked about this before Christmas, and one of the things we said at the time is people... You worry and worry and worry that people are going to play the game and they're going to say, I don't understand why experience points are tied to aspects and why can't I just have 1 point of experience points. And sometimes they say that, but most of them say something completely different. And it turned out the biggest problem in the game was looping dialogues that I'd been a little bit insufficiently meticulous about. I've been slapdash about making sure that if you were in a dialogue tree, you could actually get out of the end of it. So there was a sort of
writer's revenge.
Sartre play. Yeah, you will enjoy this. The entire game consists of these words. Sartre play effect of being trapped talking to Vincent or Aubière forever.
Some guy at a party coming up and talking to you.
Yeah, and you back towards the toilet, and then you realise somebody else got to the toilet, and you back towards the kitchen. You realise somebody's smoking weed in there, and then you back towards the front door, and the police arrive. And it's just really easy to do, and it's quite hard to test for in an automated way, because if you just forget to add an exit loop to something, or more insidiously, you forget to add an exit loop to something that doesn't require a particular variable to be set, then someone is trapped forever. But if you do this automated testing that says, make sure there's an exit, that it's hard for the testing to know whether the variable might have been set, and all. So it just needs slightly better QA on my side, and it's very easily fixable, which is why we're doing successive rounds of alpha. But I'm really pleased with the response, and while I'm here,
so happy to hear that.
What was 1% of our reserve list, because you had to pick people.
Yeah, we got something like 2,000 people offering to help test, which was very kind of everybody on that list, and we ended up sending it to I think 45 people, because it's just not yet quite ready for public consumption.
And also because, and this is something I learned from Son of Sea and Never Forgotten, is that you don't want to give your whole testing roster access to the game at the beginning, because then by the time you get to the fifth update, you've got a bunch of veterans and you're not getting anybody who's coming to the game fresh.
And that's one of the things that we are particularly aware of, particularly with the games that you make, and the whole
What do you mean? Are you saying my games are complex and opaque?
Well, I was going to say that's one of the major tensions in this game dev studio, is that you basically always want to go full Baroque on your game design and your lore.
If it ain't Baroque, don't fix it.
I mean, Cogsworth is right, but you do have a tendency for the hyper complex, and that is partly why people love your games, right? So I'm not disagreeing with that, but I am often on the side of, is there a way that we can simplify this? And I think on the few occasions that I have managed to convince you to simplify something, you have been glad you did so. So we're not talking about making a super pared down mobile match 3 game here, but I do think that some people are put off by the complexity of our games.
You're right. It was a real moment of enlightenment for me when you were writing The Lady Afterwards, and I was helpfully chipping in occasionally.
For those who have no idea what that is, it's a TRPG that I co-wrote with AK, based in the Culture Simulator universe.
And I wrote the combat system, and we play tested it, and you were like, what? And then I went back and simplified it, and your mission statement was, let's take out the complicated bits but keep it good, which sounds simple. To
be clear, I'm not an idiot.
No, I know, but the point is, I grew up in a context where you roll D100 and the critical is if you roll under 10% of your skill score, and it literally never occurred to me that if you had sort of grown up with this tradition, then you might find doing albeit basic mental arithmetic every time mildly tedious, and maybe you don't need to. It's the maybe you don't need to. That hadn't really clocked.
That's the thing. I'm not trying.
What we said at the end was it's a critical if you roll doubles or under your skill score, and I thought this seems such a good idea. I absolutely do not believe it has never been used in a TRPG before, and it has been used in a TRPG before, but because I'm a bit out of sync with the current TRPG scene, it was literally years before I found another one that did it. Delta Green does it. It's typically excellent thing, and I'm sure there are other games people think of now do it, but the basic guys, well, why do we not just say roll a double and roll into your skill rather than 10% of, or
well, if it makes you feel better, I'm being punished for this because I have been playing, going back to Alcat, Wrath of the Righteous, which is their game after before Kingmaker, and that is basically the same experience for somebody who has not grown up with the sort of D&D tabletop thing as putting my head in Mount Etna when it's exploding. Like it's absolutely bamboozling, and I actually kind of rolled up my sleeves and sat down and was like, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to learn. And before the end of the character creation screen, I was desperately clicking around for some sort of auto do this for me option, which of course Alcat, being a professional studio, have actually provided. And I think it's really interesting that that's the approach they've gone for. They have not thought, is there a way that we can basically have the same experience but make it like you just get a critical if you have a double? What they've said is, no, our games are for the people who are hyper interested in the most complex version of a tabletop campaign with all the numbers and everything, which some people really love, and that's fabulous for those people. But a lot of other people like me are just like, what is happening? Have I started playing it in the wrong language? And to make the game fun for those people, Alcat have basically put in a click this button if you are that person, and will basically make a character for you, and anytime you level up we'll make that choice for you. Which is fabulous because that does actually allow you to engage with it. But I think that's another interesting take on how
it is, and I think this is again to go back to my moment of epiphany when we were working on Lady Afterwards. Is I hadn't really absorbed that there's complexity that you need to support the experience you intend to simulate or create, and there's complexity that you don't need and should cut away. But also in the middle, there's complexity that is there because people enjoy complexity and they want a crunchy system they can get into the
absolutely, and I wouldn't want to take that away at all. That's what makes our stuff great. So I'm not trying to remove that, but I think it is often useful just to think, but why do we have this? And sometimes there's a really good reason.
Why do we have to have good and evil?
Exactly. But sometimes there isn't an answer, and actually it's an opportunity to do something a bit more approachable. But that's quite a good segue back to Murdering Darlings then, isn't it? Because you're talking about removing complexity but keeping the core elements, and we are saying, what are the core tenets of travelling? Well, for us it's travelling around Europe and giving people an experience of that, so we wanted to make sure that there were lots of bits of Europe that you could go to without having to spend £1 bazillion on this game that we can't afford. What else is good about it? Well, the writing. Okay, so great, so we can solve a lot of problems with putting more writing in, because that's what you're already good at, and that's basically what people play our games for. The weird stuff, that's a key element.
I realised we nearly didn't put Beetle Mountain in the game. I was going through my notes and I found a reference to Beetle Mountain. I thought we need to put that. The thing is,
where's Beetle Mountain going?
Well, in one of the early bits of
I was going to say, let's define Beetle Mountain.
Of concept art, one of the contenders for key art for the game, we put a big beetle on top of a mountain because that's relevant to a plot detail. And then it's sort of escaped from the game and is probably lumbering round.
He's quite a friendly-looking beetle.
He is
about 12 stories tall.
But I've realised, of course, it's one of these other things that if you're a writer...
is he not in Prague?
There's some Beatles in Prague, but originally it was going to be in Schloss Nagelsberg. And Schloss Nagelsberg is closer to Vienna than it used to be, so that might not be possible. But I've realised if you've got an isometric game, having a Beetle whose whole shtick is that he's bigger than your average frigate on top of a mountain, it's quite hard to represent that in top-down asymmetric
I don't
view.
believe for one second that you made a decision based on what would be difficult for art.
No, I just realised that was a problem when I put him back in the in the art direction. So we do have to show like
No, we'll do something
one
cool.
of his Glycerai or something. Do they have Glycerai, or is that just spiders?
I don't know why you're looking at me like I would know anything about beetles. They have too many legs. I wish them well, but I wish them far away. But no, we can do something cool because I don't know if this is a spoiler. So the smock in Krakow, is that secret?
No, I mentioned the smock, and a bunch of Poles got pleasingly happy about it, and then explained to me that apparently the smock, the dragon in Krakow,
That's what smock means in
it
Polish.
stars in his own TV show.
Yes, I remember this.
From the 70s, and wears a jaunty hat, which I was delighted by. There may not be a jaunty hat in our game, though.
Oh, you reminded me of one of the highs and lows of this current project, right? So Travelling at Night is the name of the game, and I have diligently put on a Google alert that tells me anytime we get any press about Travelling at Night. And at the minute, we don't really get any because the game isn't really in a press-ready state. So one of the worst things about my job right now is every time I get a Google alert for Travelling at Night, it's always a really miserable news article about a crash that's happened on a road, and the news article says something like, people are warned from travelling at night, and Google helpfully goes, bing, this is something Lottie wants to read, and it's really miserable. So that's the downside. But the plus side is, because we are doing a game set across the whole of Europe, and we really love Europe, I'm very sorry about the whole Brexit thing, we didn't want it, every time we mention a particular European capital or location, I almost notice an uptick in wish lists from that particular area, because a lot of Europe is not mentioned a lot, and a lot of people are very excited when their home country is brought in by another person.
I remember when I noticed
and it's really lovely to see people get so excited about, oh yes, that's me, and yes, that's that's where I used to live, and I can see in the art that you've actually done some research and you haven't just been like, oh no, Switzerland, put a cow in it with a bell. like it's really, it's such a nice interaction.
I remember again the polls when I mentioned there being a bit of an uptick in Polish wish lists, and someone said, yeah, this is the effect you're seeing is Poland has become aware that some part of it has been mentioned in foreign media. So
we do have a soft spot for Poland.
So flipping hard, Lottie.
What?
I underestimated the burden of researching all the things I have to research. And my research is fundamentally frivolous. And I have the enormous escape clause of this is an alternate history. And you may notice 3 of the cities on the map are entirely invented or have a completely different name, intentionally different name, not like Cluj-Napoca, Mahagony and Montmartre and things, many that actually exist, and there's context and intention there. But just
and giant bugs.
Researching Cornwall and brushing up on my medieval history was quite a lot of work. Researching France, Germany, Poland, Austria, and points east and south is it requires more reading than I'd expected. I mean, again, most people won't notice or care. We had a wrong named city on our game for 5 years, and nobody ever mentioned it. We only just noticed. There will be hundreds of other mistakes I'll never notice. But I do feel it's
a matter of pride.
Compulsion. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
We've always said
you're being very self-deprecating.
Our secret is to care way too much about some of the details.
But it does matter to us, especially because I was thinking about this the other day. Is because we started with Cultist Simulator, which is a much harsher game than Travelling at Night is going to be, just because it's a roguelike thing where it is supposed to be punishing and you have to pay attention and connect the dots yourself, whereas the CRPG is just a different kettle of fish. So one of the things that was that we had to be careful of with Cultist is if we are asking you to connect the dots and saying, only the clever people will figure out how to make this combination and what this reference is. If we make a mistake, then people immediately are very grumpy, because they say, well, you asked me to, engage my brain and think about it, and then you gave me false information. Like the way people are cross in a detective novel, if it turns out the murderer was somebody that was never mentioned before, and they're like, well, how was I possibly supposed to guess that? That was cheating, right? So it was very, very important that we were very accurate in Cultist Simulator fast forward to where we are now with travelling, I don't think people are going to have that same reaction to a mistake, because we're not saying, oh, well, basically get good unless, if you want to succeed in this game. But we still really care about it being accurate, and it's still in the same world. So if there are mistakes, please do let us know and we'll fix them. But you try your best, and you actually do a lot of research. You're just being British. And remember, people listening to this are not British. Like that time I ran the ad campaign, which was a bit neggy about our own games, and the Europeans loved it. And the Americans left comments like, why are you being rude about your own thing? Like, why would I want to play something that you don't think is good? It was just a total culture clash. So big up in the cafeteria.
Big up.
Sunset.
Sunset.
There's a character in Travelling at Night who's my favourite currently called Bessie Bloom. And AK has been getting into jazz and jazz culture. So he's trying to sort of emulate a Secret Histories version of like the beat coolness.
We're kind of 5,
and in
8
case
years
you haven't,
too early for beats, just to be...
You see, there's an example.
All right, yeah, fine.
And
whatever.
Also you've proven my next point, which is in case you are not aware, AK and I are not particularly cool. So we don't really know how cool people speak, but you're doing a very good impersonation of it with Bessie Bloom, and she says lots of things like sunset, and there's a whole bit where you can be like, is that good? Because everybody playing it probably wants to be cooler than they are.
I tried to read On the Road for you folks, and
didn't go well.
I got 3 chats. Oh no, he's got something. He's got something, but this is the problem with being old, is that people seem so young, and Kerouac seems so...
I mean, he
so
was,
young.
wasn't
And I got 3 chapters. He was, but... Anyway, yeah, no, I didn't finish it.
Murdering darlings, where it all ends, being accurate.
Cities...
Cutaways?
Trains.
Let's call it the same thing.
Yeah, talk about cutaways.
Well, again, this is something that I wrote about in the blog today, but one of the ways that we are trying to make sure we don't do the Curst curse on ourselves is by having these things called cutaways, which are basically small mini scenes within a bigger scene that don't require a loading screen. So to be clear, if you're wandering around the city of Prague, which is a big visual isometric scene, just as you'd expect from an isometric CRPG, you'll probably find 3 to 5 places within that scene where you can wander into, and actually the face of the building will disappear when you get close enough and reveal an interior, and you can walk into it and interact with the NPCs and get the storylines and pick up whatever objects and interesting story bits are in there, and then you can exit and go about your business. And part of this is because AK is impatient and hates loading screens, as I think many people are, and part of this is that we really wanted to pepper the places that we build in this game with as many interesting bits and pieces as possible. So at the minute I think you've got sort of 3 broad categories of things that you can interact with in a scene. One is some sort of story business, another is some sort of interactable, so something, an object you can pick up, or something that will give you some information, or a memory you might pick up from looking at a particular painting, and the third one are these cutaways, which are actual physical locations you can sort of discover, and they're semi-secret because, like I said, they're sort of, they've got the front of the external part of the building or whatever it is. So it's only when you get close to it that you'll really realise that there's a whole kind of another bit of the scene that you can enter into. But yeah, hopefully the combination of these 3 broad different bits and pieces will give every major city a real sense of vibrancy. Because again, we are limited in resource and time, so we can't fill every city with, thousands of places you can actually go into and people you can talk to. But what we can do is basically give the sense that is the case by making it feel full, and not hopefully having any city where you just sort of wander through and everything turns out just to be 2D art with some particle effects.
And yet it is all 2D art.
Yet it is. Yeah. It is. That's the trick.
I'm going to loop out and then arrow back in on a traditional comic trajectory. The best advice that I can ever share about creative work is, I mean, literally the best. I took too long to learn this, and I still often forget it. Is really straightforward. Is if you're banging your head against something, works for coding as well. Go to the toilet. Don't necessarily go to the toilet. Just step away for something that actually requires you to step away and think about something else. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 6 minutes, and come back and have another look at it, because you know what it's like when you are tangling with the problem. You've been thinking about this problem for 2 hours. You're really reluctant to change your perspective. You go away, you come back, and you think, bingo, that's it. How did I not think of that?
It actually always does work for you.
Yeah, when I
can't remember the last time you've gone away and come back and be like, no, gone.
I mean, the go to the toilet thing is a joke, but when I had a job where I had to do attend meetings, I literally used to go to the loo and come back at a meeting that was sort of going slowly, and I'd have 3 ideas, and people would say, well, do you have a helpline in there or something, just because of the change of context. But it's so easy to end up looping without realising what we're doing. And zoom out, this works macro as well. We took a long break at Christmas. We stepped over reluctance, as I always do. We came back with some reluctance, as we always do. But having come back and having some taken away from it, we were like, well, why not do this thing we hadn't thought of the rest of the time? And this thing was cutaways. And it's...
also, I think they're charming.
I think they're charming, and I think they work really well. But most CRPGs don't do them, and this is not because we are cleverer than most people who make CRPGs. In fact, it's the opposite of that. Both the CRPGs you mentioned in this cast, Torment and all 3 of the Owlcat games, and it's true of every other CRPG I can think of at the top of my head. If you go into a shop or an inn, it's a scene load, and there are really good reasons for this. One is memory constraints. Another is that often you want to draw a scene that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. Another is that you need to think carefully about scene boundaries, and perhaps you want to mark an inner safe so the BCs can't chase you in there. Lots of good reasons. And actually, years ago, I did a bunch of talks where I would at some point show a slide of scenes from Aliens, where on one side of the screen was the APC that the Marines use, spoilers, to ride into the alien nest in, and spoilers,
it doesn't
survive the experience. And the other side of the screen was Newt, the child who survived the destruction of the colony. And I always used to say, AAA studios are like the APC. The APC is huge and powerful and effective, and indie studios are like Newt, who is none of those things, except under the right circumstances. And you always have to lean into your advantages as an indie rather than trying to mimic the big ones. And as indies, among other things, we have no combat in this game. Mm-hmm. We have a very small memory footprint, especially now we've worked out that textures that are very large, this Book of Hours taught us this, occupy a lot of memory, but lots of small textures that occupy the same space are less onerous. And because Lottie is a obsessive compulsive mastermind, most of our buildings, the internal scenes are the same size as the outside. So we have the opportunity to do this because our game is super cheap.
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that's always been a really good analogy. I also think that this is personal preference, but I wonder how many people will agree. I think art really benefits from some really hard constraints. I can think, without naming names, a number of very talented filmmakers and script writers who are undoubtedly brilliant, but who, when left to their own devices, produce work that I think is less compelling or less good than work that I've seen them do under duress, right? And we talk about, what was it, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is probably one of the most enduringly popular comedy radio programs that then spawned this super famous set of books, and it's just a sort of phenomenon. But when it was first being written for radio, I mean, the scripts were being finished literally 5 minutes before they had to go on air, and the poor sound designers were sort of basically banging rocks together outside at the back to try and sort of give it some sort of audio scope.
That's the BBC Radiophonic Workshop you're talking about.
Well, they were, because they didn't have any budget. So I think if you are an engaged creative, it's actually a really good thing to have some constraint. And as an indie, we sure as hell have some constraints.
I always think about David Lynch, who, God love him.
You're a big fan.
Big fan. He'd been 80 this month, but Mulholland Drive, I would argue, is his masterpiece. Other people would have well-honed arguments why I'm wrong, but it's certainly up there. And Mulholland Drive had this turbulent production history, where at one point it was going to be a TV show, and I think Canal Plus in France had to step in to help him finish it, and it came out tight and terrifying and gorgeous. And Inland Empire is not a bad film, and if you say it is, I'll fight you. But you can tell David Lynch at that point, just he'd worked out that he could make films for cheap if somebody gave him a DV camera, and he got a bunch of talented actors who loved him because he was great, to come and work for him, presumably for relatively cheap, but he's flexible. And it oh Lord, it does go on. and by the end it's a bit of a relief.
Well, and this is the thing, I think people listening to this are probably gamers. I'm going to go on a limb there. And I'm sure you can all think of a AAA game that has, a really big budget, a really big dev team, real talent in the studio, but for whatever reason didn't work for you. And I think often the cause of that is, we are two people plus freelancers. So we've come up with a sort of shonky, interesting, innovative way to do these cutouts, which we think will add a lot of value to the points of the game that we really care about. But if we had 200 people in an art team and, £500 million to spend on this game, I wouldn't be thinking, what could we do to make it interesting and innovative? I'd be thinking, give the art department of 200 people 6 months and they will populate the entirety of Prague. And I don't need to worry about it because we've got all the resources. So I'm not saying that it's better or worse to be an indie or to be a AAA person, but I do think that art that is forced to question itself, is forced to reckon with what's actually important to it, and has some sort of master other than just the vision of the artist, often comes out more interesting than if it's just left to stretch out in the sun.
Quite inspiring, my darling.
You reckon?
Yeah, I do.
I really believe it.
No, and I agree. And I was just thinking, we were talking the other day about games outstaying their welcome and about the Curst, and one of the counter examples I came up with was Deus Ex, the very first Deus Ex game.
We love Deus Ex.
Arguably, probably my first favourite game of all time, and it's really long. It makes the successor games look dinky by comparison, and it keeps going and evolving. And we thought, why doesn't it outstay its welcome? And one of the reasons we thought is the sheer variety. One is that it stays with a sort of core fantasy all the way through, despite its mutations. But it occurs to me as another thing is I didn't realise when I first played it how many constraints it was made under. I think you told me, you did some research around it, that the legendary gravelly voice of the lead character
yes.
was it one of the QA guys?
Yeah, it was literally just a QA guy who had a good voice, and they were like, "Oi, Jason, come and voice the entire narrative."
And I think Deus Ex went way over budget and time. Whenever I look, I think it was only 5 years, rather than like 8 years or something.
But at the time, that was really long for a game.
Yeah, but I think that it did have its own constraints, and it benefited from them.
So I guess if you're going to take anything away, I bet the people listening to this, I bet you are quite creative souls. And so if you want to give any bit of art a go, whether it's visual, coding, design, whatever, I strongly urge you to embrace the problems that you have, embrace the limitations. You don't have any money, that's probably a good thing, because it'll make you think about how I can make a really tight, small scoped thing. And I bet you can do it.
Every so often we do an AMA and somebody says something like, if you had AAA money, what game would you make? And I've gone from having specific answers to saying I'm not sure I want to, and now I'd say I'd give the money to the International Committee of the Red Cross and move to somewhere that didn't have a extradition agreement with the UK.
It's hard to think. I mean, I suppose
I wouldn't want to work with a blank check. I genuinely wouldn't.
Because there's firstly because it's never...
And there's never a blank check.
I was just going to say there's always some sort of sting in the tail. It is difficult because, if we had infinite money, we could work on a game for infinite amount of time.
And that's much of the problem.
But we'd hate it because by the end of it, we'd be bored to death with it, and we wouldn't have it would be flabby because we'd sort of forget bits of the game that we intended to put in other bits as we got excited about something else. So that wouldn't be worth it. I think if there was one feature... Probably, there is an expectation of full voiceover for text-based CRPGs, and the reason we don't, you see that laugh, almost Vincent Price. The reason we don't do this is basically because once you start doing voice acting, it's very difficult to change the script, right? And AK is writing up to and past launch day, and we love the freedom. Particularly AK loves the freedom of even post-launch putting all these free patches out, whether that's bug fixing or just new content or whatever it is. And the moment you start recording stuff, you either have to freeze the script and not do any more writing so that you can get the voice actors doing it properly, or you have to continually get voice actors back in the studio and say, could you just read this line that's slightly different? So, money wouldn't solve that problem. And then the other way to take a big amount of money that we don't have is to take it into these big sort of hero features, which are basically multiplayer, or lots of localization or something. And I just don't think any of that would really benefit the kind of games that we make. So, by the way, if any millionaire is listening to this and wants to give loads of money to us, please do.
No,
we'll
don't.
put it. No, but my point, I don't want to come across as sort of pious and silly. Like, money's great and money helps, but in terms of the blank check thing, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, no, I don't want to run out of money. If we run out of money, we'll make it the game.
That's the thing. I just wanted to make it clear to the Fates who may be listening that we're not just like, oh, money's for like the losers.
No, but I do think, money never comes without strings. And if somebody said we want to invest £1 million in your game, then
no, I meant give. Leave under a rock.
But even then, what would he do with all that money other than spend 10 years making their game? It's not like we're going to
you make a good
hire
point.
star
And
actors
also,
or a team.
no one is going to give us £1 million, so it's fine.
But but specifically, I'd rather work small with what you've got, as long as you've got enough. Not running out of money is a big deal.
That's the key thing.
But again, another piece of really good advice I was given years ago, that is the opposite of creative, is I was talking to somebody for a games consultancy and said, what piece of advice should I take away and clasp to my bosom, and they said, the amount of money you put into a game is very loosely correlated to the amount of money that game
That's
makes.
very true.
Everyone thinks they'll make the sequel twice as big and it'll make twice as much money.
Particularly true in indie.
And it does not usually work that way. So...
Well, I think we should call it there.
We
We had a
should.
good first sprint. We're feeling good.
We did. We should talk about the mailbag, because we meant to say something
We
about
did.
that.
Okay, we'll publish this somewhere that anyone can see it next
Yeah.
week. But if you're listening to this, we'd like to start doing a Q&A bit in these podcasts. So if you have any questions for us about game dev, about our particular games, about anything to do with making games generally, please pop us an email.
And we can say Mrs. Trellis of North Wales would like to know.
That's the thing, because if you don't send us questions, we'll have to make them up and pretend that you did, and we'll probably make you sound much less intelligent
And
than you
Mrs.
are.
Trellis of North Wales says, is it true that your cats are as beautiful as they appear?
Exactly, that's not what we want here, ladies and gents. That's not what we want. So please do email us, contact@weatherfactory.biz if you fancy it, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Have a spooky day.